Hello friends, coming back to you with more videos. We are going to try something a little bit different today. We are going to be doing a technique video, and I wanted to do this because I know sometimes I throw things out in the middle of videos and I try to kind of put some technique in there, and hopefully that helps you guys, but there are a couple things that I wanted to go over that are really basic to singing, and one is breathing. We're finally going to talk about breathing and what happens when we breathe. So there are two things that I want you to keep in mind as we go through. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer because I can talk about breathing forever. So two things I want you to keep in mind as we are going through this. The first thing is breathing is a natural process. It is a natural process that happens no matter what you do until you die, right? So that is important for couple of reasons. One is we as adults, especially children a little bit less so, but as humans we tend to try to complicate things that don't need to be complicated, and we try to put band-aids on and force our body to do things that it already knows how to do because it was designed to do them. This is only going to make your life more difficult. So we're going to talk about how to not do that, because breathing is a natural process. That was the first thing. Second thing is breathing is movement. Movement must occur in order for breathing to happen. Sometimes these are big movements, like our lungs expanding and our body moving in a certain way that we're going to talk about in a second. Sometimes it's what we would call micro movements, which are little tiny things that happen in the body that are really difficult to perceive but are important to acknowledge. And that has to do with the way the brain relates to the body, and that's a whole separate discussion. But just go with me for now. Those are the two things I want you to keep in mind. Breathing is a natural process, so we're not trying to introduce anything new here. And the breathing is movement, which means our body has to be movable. So what happens when we breathe? Raise your hand if you know where your lungs are. Yay! We probably know that our lungs are in our chest cavity, right? That's probably pretty obvious. What you may not know is that your lungs actually extend the whole length of your rib cage. So all the way from the bottom of your rib cage, the bottom of your sternum, kind of near your waist, all the way up past your collarbone, there is lung tissue. That is a whole lot of lung, all of which is going to expand when we inhale. That means taking in the air. Another thing, that is a three-dimensional event. So not only do you have the lung tissue from the bottom of your rib cage to the top of your collarbone, it is also in the front half of you and in the back half of you. This is important because sometimes as people we perceive only what our eyes can see, and think about that for a second. Perception can happen with more than just eyeballs, right? We're perceiving only what the eyes can see, when actually there's a whole three-dimensional part of us in the back that is doing things. Sometimes we picture ourselves as little cartoon characters. Little two-dimensional cartoon characters wandering around doing our little thing, when actually we are three-dimensional humans who were designed to breathe. So the first thing I want you to do is actually blow out all of your air. And you'll discover you even have more air left after that. And then I want you to just relax your whole body and let the air come in. Right. Take a minute. If you felt lightheaded, get a glass of water, take a break, sit down. Number one rule in my studio when I'm teaching is please don't faint. So if at any point you feel faint, stop what you're doing. Do not power through. This is not a moment to be a hero, especially because I'm not there, so I can't call 911. I've never had anybody faint, just for disclaimer purposes. Okay, we're gonna do that again. And what I want you to this time notice is two things. I want you to notice that you have more air in your lungs than you think you do. You're gonna notice that when you're breathing out. You'll notice that I breathed all the way out and then I still had enough air to give you instructions left. That's what we call vital capacity. That is the little bit of extra air that lives in your lungs just in case. We're gonna blow as much of that out as possible, and that is gonna train the body to know that no, you're not gonna die if you're using all your air, you're gonna be okay. And then we're gonna relax the whole body, release all of that extra tension that's preventing the air from coming in, and allow the air to come in a natural way, but we wanna see what happens in the whole body, whole three-dimensional body when we do that. So 2 things. Notice what happens when the air goes out, reaching that vital capacity. Notice what happens when the air comes in, that it's coming in a 3-dimensional way. We're going to talk more about that, but I want you to just try that with me and notice. We're going to blow out all our air again. And then you'll still have more left, even if it sounds a little bit like a helium alien. And then you're going to release. Right? And hopefully your whole body moved. If it did not, do not worry. We are going to address that momentarily. Okay, so that for me is the quickest way to get to know what our body's natural breathing process is like. You will notice this if you have small children and babies. They breathe really, really well because we have not yet trained them to breathe badly. So if there's one thing you can do, let your child continue to breathe normally. How do I do that? That's a whole, find me after church. We'll talk about that later. All that to say, breathing is a natural process. And now we're going to get to breathing is movement. And we want movement to happen, again, 3-dimensionally. So we're going to do a couple of things to get that to happen. First thing we're going to do is I want you to actually lean forward so that you're kind of almost like elbows on your knees. I'm not going to do elbows on knees because you won't be able to see me, but lean forward in your chair, feet on the floor as far as you can, and kind of let your guts hang out. I know we all like to suck our guts in, but don't do that right now. Let it all hang out. And I want you to suck in your air like you're breathing it in through a straw, and I want you to notice if your back moves at all. I'm hoping it will. So blow out all your old air first, and then through a straw, and see if you can get that back half of you to move. You might notice it in your upper back, in your shoulders. You might notice it in your lower back, near your lumbar spine. Either way, all of it is good. We're gonna do that again. So blow out your air, and then slowly in through a straw. And the reason we do it in through a straw, you can breathe out again, is just to slow down the intake of air so that it's easier to notice what the body is doing. So those are kind of a couple things you can do to start to notice your breath. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about anatomy. Yay! So, raise your hand if you've heard of the diaphragm. I can't see you raise your hands, but I'm assuming some of you raised your hands. If not, that's okay. The diaphragm is an involuntary muscle. This is really important. If you have had singing lessons before, if you have been in choir before, you have probably heard the phrase, breathe from your diaphragm. This is very well intentioned. However, it is an incomplete instruction because the diaphragm is an involuntary muscle. It means you cannot control it, no matter what you do. And that's good, because if we could, then we would go to sleep and not wake up again, because we'd forget to breathe while we were sleeping. So think of it like your heart. Your heart is gonna beat until it stops, right? And as long as your heart is beating, it's just doing that. You don't have to think about it. You do not have to try to make your heart beat or figure that out. Same thing with the diaphragm. You cannot stop it from moving. You cannot make it move. It is an involuntary, cannot be controlled muscle. However, but you're thinking to yourself, but Catherine, we just stopped our breathing and things stopped moving. Correct. So again, think of it like your heart muscle. If you run in place really fast, you can cause your heartbeat to elevate, right? You can make it go faster. If you learn deep breathing like in yoga, you can slow the beat of your heart. So these are indirect forms of influence that can allow us to influence those muscles that we do not have direct control over. Same thing with the diaphragm. We can stop breathing, we can control the abdominal muscles, and what's called the intercostal muscles. Those are the muscles in between your ribs, and things like that. And just with the instruction our brain gives to our bodies, we can influence what the diaphragm is doing. So when people say breathe with your diaphragm, you can't not. So you're already doing it. So congratulations. But you can do things to influence it. This is one of my most important myth-busting things I need to say to people, because it's just misleading otherwise. So I'm going to show you a picture now. Because, surprise, you have more than one diaphragm. Oh, let me see if I can get this in focus. There we go. So here is your diaphragm that's in your body. It sits at the bottom of your rib cage. Ooh, there we go. Okay, and you'll see here it's got two positions. It's got the inhale position where it is slightly lower, and it's got the exhale position, breathing out, where it is slightly higher. Now look down here, this is in the pelvic floor. You've got another diaphragm at the bottom of your pelvis that does the same thing. On the inhale, it's going to be in its lower position, and on the exhale, it's going to be in its higher position. Now, why does this matter? It matters because in here, in between the two diaphragms, are all of your guts. And in order for your lungs to expand up here, shoop, they're going to expand out. All of your guts on the inside have to move, shoop, out of the way. So that's what the diaphragms do. They move the guts out of the way so that the lungs can expand. And then when it's time to breathe out again, they move the guts back up and the lungs helps the lungs come in and the breath go out. Now, believe it or not, there's even more science we could get into. I'm not going to do that to you. But I want you to know these things because the more you know. Anybody remember that? No? Just me? Okay. Because if you can acknowledge how your body is designed to work, by the Lord. I get to say that on the church channel. Woohoo! I don't get to say that in my studio classes. We were designed this way. And as we all know, the more we try to help God do the things that he already knows how to do, it doesn't go well, right? We do not need to help. We don't need to help. So the more we can acknowledge what is already true, the easier the breath is going to be in the body. So let's do another experiment now. Gonna do the same thing. This time I want you to maybe put some hands on your hips or a little bit around the bottom of your rib cage, somewhere where you can feel your ribs move. And you are going to breathe out all your air. You're gonna feel your rib cage go down. And then allow the air to come in and the rib cage to expand. Yeah. Couple more times. Take a couple normal breaths in between so you don't get lightheaded. That's our rule. No lightheadedness, no fainting. Blow out all the old air. And allow the new air to come in. Yeah. Allowing both those diaphragms to move all your guts out of the way so that your lungs can expand and swing out and up. Here's a good model for this. Take one hand over the top of the other, kind of put it at the bottom of your sternum. I'm going to hold mine up higher so you can see, but yours should be kind of down here, almost near your belly button, but not quite, just bottom of the sternum, because that's where your diaphragm lives. This is representing your diaphragm, your upper diaphragm, that's going to move up and down as you breathe. The elbows are representing the bottom part of your rib cage. So when we inhale, our diaphragm is going to go down. Our ribs are going to swing up and out, which allows the lungs to expand. And then on our exhale, when we blow out our air, the diaphragm is going to go up, the ribs are going to swing down and in. That's just going to happen. And all I want you to do is notice it, okay? So we're going to blow all the air out. Then allow the air to come in. Good. Blow all the air out. Allow the air to come in. One more time. Blow the air out. Allow the air to come in. Really good. Take a break. Okay. Now, why does this matter? How does this affect what we do in church? No, I do not want you to get distracted with your breathing technique while you're singing in church. That's not the point. We can do that in here when we're practicing our hymns together. The point is, if you feel like you are running out of air in the middle of a hymn, remember, your body knows how to take in air. It just does. It does not need your help to achieve this. So all you have to do is get out of the way, easier said than done, simple but not easy, and allow the breath to come back into the body, which it can do really quickly if we're just allowing it to release and have all the air come back in, and then we can continue on with the next phrase, right? Now that we've put this video up, we will talk about this more in future videos with hymns, so we can kind of practice that. But wanted us to bear that in mind. I am gonna throw my third level, there we go. I'm like trying to do 3s and 2s at the same time. Third level breathing piece of information at you. This one is a lot more subtle, it's a lot more advanced, but I just want you to know that it exists. And that is talking about the spine. The spine actually moves when we breathe. Yes, it does. Now, remember at the beginning we talked about big movements and little micro movements that are going to be a lot harder to perceive. This one is going to be a lot harder to perceive. This is something that takes a lot of practice to start to notice. Again, you will notice it best on babies and toddlers. So if you happen to have a baby or a toddler in your life, you know, take a look the next time you see them breathing, which is hopefully all the time. You'll actually see on their back, especially on newborn babies, you'll actually see their spine move. And it's just moving in and out, in and out, in and out. As they breathe. This is totally normal, and it's very cool because it can happen with us too. We just have the weight of the world on our shoulders as grown-ups, and so, you know, we tend to get all tense and freaked out, and it interrupts our natural breathing process. So, show you another picture. Behold a spine. Let me go over here so we can get it in focus. In focus. There we go. All right. Big, long spine. It is curved. It is not a straight line, okay? So your head is sitting up here on the top, and your pelvic bone attaches to these little guys right here at the bottom. And then the spine curves up through the middle of us all the way to the top. So what's going to happen is, as we inhale, the spine is going to very slightly gather towards the center. Very, 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 very slightly. And then as we exhale, it's going to expand in both directions towards the top and the bottom. This is a better way to do that. There we go. So on the inhale, it's going to gather very slightly. And on the exhale, it's going to lengthen. Gather very slightly on the inhale, lengthen on the exhale. And again, why does this matter? Because the more we know about how our body is designed to work, the easier it is for us to allow it to work that way. Now, final thought here, because I know this one is a long one. The other reason I think it's important for us to acknowledge the movement of the spine in breathing is because it means that there is always something to focus on that is expanding. It means we never have to focus on the contracting part of breathing, which usually happens when we exhale, our lungs come down and in like we just experienced, right? And that's important for our kind of mental communication with our body as human beings, as fallen human beings. Anytime something is contracting, we tend to perceive and think of that as being a tense activity. That's just kind of how we work. So by having something to focus on that is always expanding in one direction or another, it gives us a way to shift what we're thinking about so that we're always thinking about that release. Think of it like the old little fortune tellers you made as a kid, right? Where you'd fold the paper and then you could do it like this way and then you could do it that way and then this way and then that way. Breathing is very much like that. So what do I mean? I mean that when we inhale, when we take air in, we're going to expand, the lungs are going to expand, swinging down and out. And then as we exhale, that's when our spine is going to lengthen. So then we're going to lengthen this way. So do that. In fact, do that with me with our hands. We're going to blow out the air, allowing the spine to lengthen. And then inhale all the way around. And then exhale. Spine lengthens. And then inhale all the way down to the pelvic floor. And then exhale. Spine lengthens, and then inhale, exhale, and it's actually lengthening in both directions. You just can't see my bottom hand. Probably should have set the camera up differently, but I didn't, and here we are. So again, if at any point you feel lightheaded when you're practicing this, please stop. Do not be a hero. Never be a hero. No, sometimes there are moments, but this is not it. Okay. That is a lot of information about breathing. We talked about breathing being a natural process, and that all we have to do is get out of the way and let it happen. We talked about breathing being movement because our whole body is moving. We talked about all the moving parts, the lungs that go all the way up to your collarbone, and the 2 diaphragms that move together, one at the bottom of your rib cage and one in the pelvic floor. Pelvic floor, by the way, is just the bottom of your pelvis. It's just a fancy term for what that is. We talked about the movement of the spine, so breathing is movement. I'm going to leave you with a final thing to think about to really get this three-dimensional breathing going on, because we have lung tissue in the back. You actually have more lung tissue in the back of you than you do in the front. Fun fact. And this I stole from a good friend of mine. Some of you know my friend Tasha, who sings in the opera. This was a great image of hers, and I'm totally stealing it because it's great. Imagine that you are wearing a belt around your middle, okay? All the way around, it goes all the way around you. And imagine now that that belt is covered in noses, covered in little noses all the way around. So that when you breathe in, when you inhale, all of those noses are going to breathe in. And when you exhale, all of those noses are going to breathe out. This is a really silly, fun way to really get that 3-dimensional movement happening. That is, again, a natural process. So, that's my breathing speech. If you have questions, do please leave them in the comments, or if you go to my church, find me after church. I'm always happy to talk about breathing. Yeah, those are my little tips. We'll talk more about this in future videos as well. Happy breathing!